In the year 1763, the forests of Pennsylvania still whispered with the fading echoes of musket fire. The French and Indian War, a brutal 7-year struggle, had drawn to its weary close, leaving the British crown triumphant, yet burdened with a staggering cost that would reshape an empire. Across 100 battlefields, from the Ohio Valley's shadowed ravines to Quebec's frostbitten shores, American settlers had fought shoulder to shoulder with red-coated regulars, their blood mingling with that of their British brethren to wrest North America from the grasp of France and her native allies. The fleur-de-lis, once a proud banner over vast territories, no longer fluttered in the wind, replaced by the Union Jack's bold stripes, waving supreme from the icy reaches of Hudson Bay to the sun-drenched keys of Florida. Victory, however, came not as a laurel of glory but as a chain of debt, its links forged in the fires of war, each one heavier than the last, threatening to drag the empire into an abyss of financial ruin. In London's grand corridors of power, Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Grenville, pored over ledger books, their pages stained with numbers that told a grim tale, the war's price, a colossal £70 million, a sum so vast it defied the imagination of even the most seasoned financiers. The national debt had doubled, its weight pressing down on the crown's coffers like a millstone, interest payments alone devouring half the government's yearly revenue, leaving little for the maintenance of an empire stretched thin across oceans. Across the Atlantic, 10,000 imperial soldiers remained stationed in North America, their presence a constant drain, £300,000 each year, a figure that echoed like a drumbeat in Grenville's mind, demanding a solution, demanding sacrifice. His calculating gaze turned westward, across 3,000 miles of restless sea, to the colonies, those distant provinces that had been shielded by the crown's might, provinces that now, in the eyes of London, must bear the burden of their own protection. In the smoky taverns of Virginia, planters gathered, their voices alive with ambition, speaking of the Ohio Valley's rich, untamed lands, now open for settlement, or so they believed, their dreams fueled by the blood they had spilled in the war's brutal campaigns. Pennsylvania farmers, weathered by years of toil, envisioned their sons carving homesteads from the western forests, each axe stroke a promise of prosperity, each cleared acre a legacy for generations yet unborn. In Massachusetts, merchants calculated profits from new trade routes, their ledgers filled with visions of wealth flowing from ports unhindered by French interference, their ambitions as boundless as the seas they sailed. These Americans, hardened by years of shared sacrifice, saw the fruits of victory as their birthright, their loyalty to the crown tempered by a growing sense of entitlement, a belief that the empire's triumph was theirs as much as any lord's in London's gilded halls. Yet the proclamation of 1763 fell like a thunderbolt, shattering these dreams with the cold precision of royal decree. King George III's edict drew an invisible line along the Appalachian crest, forbidding settlement beyond its rugged peaks, reserving those hard-won lands for native tribes, many of whom had fought against the crown, their allegiance a bitter memory for colonists who had faced their tomahawks. Veterans, expecting land grants as reward for their service, found their hopes dashed, their sacrifices mocked by a distant monarch who seemed to value the loyalty of former enemies over that of his own subjects. Speculators who had poured fortunes into Western claims watched their investments crumble, their parchment deeds now worthless as the paper they were written on, the proclamations' line stretching like a prison wall from Canada's frozen rivers to Georgia's sultry pines, caging colonial ambitions within boundaries that felt like betrayal. In Williamsburg's candlelit chambers, a young lawyer named Patrick Henry read the proclamation with a fire kindling in his chest, its words a mockery of the sacrifices Americans had made, each clause a challenge to the very freedoms they had fought for, each restriction a chain forged in London's arrogance. How could an empire claim to protect its people while denying them the expansion that protection was meant to secure? How could a king demand loyalty while barring his subjects from the lands they had bled to win? In Boston, Samuel Adams, a master of political alchemy, saw in this grievance a spark to ignite defiance, his mind already weaving networks of resistance, his pen ready to transform provincial frustration into a unified cry for justice. The proclamation of 1763 meant to preserve peace with native tribes, instead sowed seeds of discord, its ink staining the fragile bond between Crown and colonies, setting the stage for a storm that would soon break over an empire unprepared for the fury of its own people. In the shadowed counting houses of London, 1764 dawned with the weight of an empire's survival resting on George Grenville's shoulders, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, his desk buried under ledgers that screamed of a nation drowning in debt, the French and Indian War's grim arithmetic demanding a reckoning. The Crown's triumph had secured North America, but at a cost that gnawed at the empire's foundations, £70 million, a figure that loomed like a spectre over Whitehall's marble halls, interest payments swallowing half the government's revenue. Each coin spent a reminder of the 10,000 redcoats still stationed across the Atlantic, their upkeep bleeding £300,000 annually from a treasury stretched to breaking. Grenville's cold, calculating eyes turned to the colonies, those distant provinces shielded by British blood and steel, their prosperity a testament to the empire's sacrifice. Their wealth, he reasoned, must now answer the call to sustain the very protection they enjoyed. Across the ocean, in the bustling ports of Boston and New York, the Sugar Act of 1764 landed like a spark in a powder keg, its modest duties on molasses, sugar, and luxury imports seeming reasonable to London's bureaucrats, but to colonial merchants, each tax was a blade slicing through profit margins honed by generations of daring trade. For decades, these traders had thrived in the grey shadows of imperial law, their ships slipping past drowsy customs officials, their cargoes transformed from contraband to commerce with a few well-placed coins, smuggling not a crime but a way of life, a dance of calculated risk that fueled colonial economies. The Sugar Act changed everything, its enforcement no longer a lax ritual, but a relentless machine, Royal Naval patrols multiplying like hawks over the Atlantic, their cannons trained on vessels that once sailed unmolested, customs officers, now backed by the Crown's unyielding will, scouring manifests with unforgiving precision. In Boston's wharves, where the scent of salt and tar mingled with whispers of defiance, merchants gathered in dimly lit taverns, their ledgers open, their voices low, calculating the ruin that loomed as duties choked their trade, each shilling paid to London a theft from their livelihoods. New York's counting houses buzzed with similar anger, traders who had built fortunes on the delicate balance of risk and reward, now branded as criminals, their once profitable ventures strangled by regulations that cared nothing for their survival. The Act's enforcement was no mere inconvenience, it was a betrayal, a declaration that the Crown valued revenue over loyalty, that the colonies existed to serve London's coffers, not to share in the empire's glory. The Customs Service, once a pliable ally, became an adversary, its officers no longer swayed by bribes, their diligence a chain binding the freewheeling commerce that had defined colonial ports. In the smoky glow of Philadelphia's coffeehouses, merchants like Charles Thompson whispered of resistance, their words cautious but resolute, their minds turning to strategies that could preserve their way of life against an empire that seemed to forget their sacrifices. The Sugar Act, though cloaked in the guise of fiscal necessity, struck at the heart of colonial autonomy, its duties not just a tax, but a challenge to the unspoken compact that had allowed trade to flourish under flexible interpretations of law. For years, colonists had navigated the empire's regulations with a wink and a nod, their enterprise fueling both provincial prosperity and imperial might, but now London's heavy hand threatened to crush the very spirit that had sustained its American dominions. In Virginia's plantation manors, where tobacco lords counted their wealth in hogsheads, the Act's ripple effects stirred unease. Planters reliant on trade routes now patrolled by royal sloops, their profits vulnerable to the whims of distant lawmakers who knew nothing of their world. The Sugar Act's enforcement transformed every transaction into a confrontation, every shipment a potential battleground. Its levies a reminder that the Crown's protection came with a price that felt like subjugation. In Charleston's bustling markets, rice merchants felt the same sting, their cargoes scrutinized by officials whose zeal outstripped their predecessors' leniency, each inspection a wound to the pride of men who saw themselves as partners in the empire, not its servants. The Act's shadow stretched beyond commerce, sowing seeds of a deeper discontent. Colonists who had fought alongside redcoats now questioned why their loyalty earned them suspicion, why their victories in the war secured them chains instead of freedom. In the quiet corners of colonial assemblies, men like Samuel Adams began to see opportunity in this grievance, their minds weaving plans to turn economic frustration into political defiance, their pens ready to craft a narrative of resistance that would echo across the 13 colonies. The Sugar Act, meant to stabilize an empire, instead lit a fuse, its spark destined to ignite a fire that would burn through the fragile bonds of imperial unity, setting the stage for a conflict that would shake the world. In the spring of 1765, a storm gathered over the American colonies, its dark clouds born not of weather but of policy. The Stamp Act, a decree from London's distant halls that struck like lightning into the heart of provincial life, igniting a fire that would soon blaze beyond the Crown's control. Unlike the Sugar Act, which had pinched the purses of merchants, this new measure reached into every corner of colonial existence, demanding a tax on every newspaper, every legal document, every marriage license, every college diploma, even the dice and playing cards that filled tavern evenings with laughter, each stamped with the Crown's seal, each costing coin that colonists saw as tribute to an empire that no longer seemed their own. In Boston's crowded streets, in Virginia's plantation parlors, in Philadelphia's bustling markets, the Act's weight was felt, its implications a violation of rights older than the colonies themselves, a challenge to the sacred principle that no Englishman could be taxed without consent, a principle etched in the Magna Carta's ancient parchment, now mocked by a parliament that claimed authority over subjects it did not represent. In Williamsburg's shadowed chambers, Patrick Henry, a young lawyer with a voice like thunder, read the Act's text with rising fury, its words a betrayal of the sacrifices colonists had made, their blood spilled in the French and Indian War, their futures mortgaged to secure an empire that now demanded payment for their very existence. How could a king, sworn to protect his subjects, allow such an imposition? How could a parliament, 3,000 miles away, claim the right to reach into colonial pockets without granting them a voice in its halls? Henry's anger was not solitary. In Boston, Samuel Adams, a brewer turned political alchemist, saw in the Act's audacity a chance to forge unity from discontent, his sharp mind already spinning webs of resistance, his pen poised to transform scattered grievances into a continental cause. The Stamp Act was no mere tax, it was a gauntlet thrown at the feet of every colonist, a declaration that their liberties, hard won through generations of toil, were subject to London's whim. In the taverns of New York, merchants and artisans gathered, their conversations crackling with defiance, their ledgers forgotten as they debated the Act's constitutional outrage, its stamps a symbol of subjugation, each one a reminder that their lives, their businesses, their very freedoms were now tethered to Westminster's will. The Act's reach was relentless, touching not just commerce, but the daily rituals of colonial life. A newspaper without a stamp was contraband, a contract unstamped was void, a marriage license unpaid was invalid. The Crown's hand now gripped the quill of every scribe, the deck of every gambler, the diploma of every scholar. In Charleston's humid air, rice planters and dock workers alike felt the sting, their resentment fueled by the realization that London's bureaucrats cared nothing for their struggles, their taxes feeding an empire that seemed to view them as tenants rather than partners. The Sons of Liberty rose from this ferment, their name borrowed from a fiery speech in Parliament, their purpose born in the colony's growing anger, meeting in secret to plan public spectacles, their actions a blend of shadow and light, their protests orchestrated to appear spontaneous, yet strike with precision. In Boston, under Adams's deft guidance, they hung effigies of stamp distributors from liberty trees, their symbolic executions a warning to any who dared enforce the Act, their crowds materializing as if by magic, their message clear: collaboration with London's tyranny would bring social ruin, physical peril, perhaps both. In Philadelphia, Charles Thompson's quiet resolve gave the movement structure. In New York, Isaac Sears rallied dockworkers and shopkeepers, their defiance spreading like wildfire through ports and villages, each act of resistance a thread in a tapestry of rebellion. The Stamp Act's constitutional implications burned deepest in the minds of colonial lawyers, men trained in English law, men who revered the Magna Carta's promise that taxation required representation, men like John Adams, whose legal mind began crafting arguments that would echo through the coming decade. To them, the act was not just a financial burden, but a legal abomination, a violation of rights that no theory of virtual representation could justify. Benjamin Franklin's scorn for such claims, voiced in London salons, carried the weight of colonial contempt, virtual representation as useless as virtual bread to a starving man. The act's enforcement loomed like a noose. Stamp distributors appointed to collect the tax found themselves pariahs, their offices burned, their persons threatened, their resignations coerced by crowds that spoke for a people united in outrage. The Stamp Act, meant to fund an empire's protection, instead forged a new kind of resistance, its stamps uncollected, its authority defied, its legacy a spark that would kindle a revolution, a fire that would soon consume the fragile bonds between crown and colonies, leaving only the question of how fiercely it would burn. In the spring of 1766, a deceptive calm settled over the American colonies, the Stamp Act's repeal sending ripples of triumph through Boston's cobblestone streets, New York's bustling wharves, Philadelphia's crowded markets, bells ringing, cannons roaring, toasts raised to King George III's health, to Parliament's wisdom, to an empire seemingly restored to harmony. The colonists' fierce resistance, their boycotts choking British trade, their protests turning London's merchants into reluctant allies, had forced Westminster's hand. The Act's taxes, those hated stamps on every document, every newspaper, every deck of cards, now consigned to history's dustbin, their withdrawal a victory for provincial defiance, a testament to the power of unified resistance. Yet beneath the euphoria a shadow lingered. The Declaratory Act, passed in the same breath as the repeal, its words a cold assertion of Parliament's unyielding authority, claiming the right to bind the colonies in all cases whatsoever, a decree that hung like a storm cloud over the celebrations, its implications unnoticed by many, but keenly felt by those with eyes to see. In Boston's smoky taverns, Samuel Adams, his mind sharp as a blade, read the Declaratory Act with a chill of recognition, its language not a retreat but a challenge, a proclamation that London's victory in repealing the Stamp Act was tactical, not strategic, a temporary concession masking an unshakable resolve to govern the colonies as subjects, not partners. The Act's words were a gauntlet, asserting Parliament's supremacy over provincial assemblies, denying the colonists' claim to the ancient English right of no taxation without representation, a right they had defended with boycotts, with effigies, with the blood of 5 men in Boston streets. Adams saw the truth. The repeal was no surrender, it was a maneuver, a pause in a larger game, London retreating only to regroup, its lawmakers already plotting new ways to assert control, to extract revenue, to remind the colonies of their place in an empire that brooked no defiance. In Virginia's House of Burgesses, Patrick Henry's voice, resonant with the fire of 1765, stirred once more. The Declaratory Act's claim to absolute authority, a mockery of the sacrifices colonists had made, their loyalty in the French and Indian War, their blood spilled on frontier battlefields, now answered with a decree that reduced them to mere pawns in Westminster's chessboard. How could a parliament, 3,000 miles distant, claim to speak for an empire's farthest reaches? How could it demand obedience without granting a single seat in its hallowed chambers? Henry's resolutions against the Stamp Act had electrified the colonies. His words now turned to this new threat, his rhetoric a spark ready to ignite the smouldering grievances of a people who had tasted victory and would not easily yield it. In Philadelphia's coffeehouses, merchants like Charles Thompson whispered of the Act's deeper menace, its assertion of unchecked power, a warning that London viewed colonial rights as privileges, revocable at will, subject to the whims of a parliament that answered only to itself. The repeal had loosened the noose, but the Declaratory Act tightened it anew, its language a chain forged to bind colonial aspirations, its intent to ensure that every future policy, every tax, every restriction could be imposed without question, without consent. The merchants, whose ships had carried the boycott's weight, whose profits had suffered to force the repeal, now saw their triumph hollowed, their victory shadowed by a decree that promised future battles, future burdens, future betrayals. In Charleston's humid markets, rice planters and traders gathered, their conversations tinged with unease, the Declaratory Act's implications reaching even their southern shores, its words a reminder that the empire's protection came with a price, that their prosperity, their autonomy, their very identity as Englishmen was subject to London's fiat. The Sons of Liberty, born in the Stamp Act's crucible, stirred once more, their networks of resistance, their committees of correspondence, humming with quiet purpose, their leaders like Christopher Gadsden in Charleston, Isaac Sears in New York, ready to weave provincial anger into a continental tapestry of defiance. The Act's assertion of parliamentary supremacy was no mere legal footnote. It was a declaration of war on colonial self-governance, a challenge to the principles that had fueled the Stamp Act's defeat, a spark that would kindle new fires of resistance. The Declaratory Act, though drowned in the clamour of repeal's celebration, was a seed planted in fertile ground, its roots sinking deep into colonial consciousness, its branches destined to bear the fruit of rebellion. In the quiet of colonial assemblies, in the fervour of tavern debates, in the resolve of men like Adams and Henry, the Act's true meaning took shape, a warning that the empire's retreat was fleeting, that the battle for liberty was far from won, that the colonists' dreams of self-rule would face new tests, new taxes, new chains. The repeal had been a victory, but the Declaratory Act ensured it was a fleeting one, a pause before the storm, a moment of calm before the clash that would redefine an empire or destroy it. In the summer of 1767, a new shadow fell across the American colonies, the Townshend Acts, crafted by Chancellor Charles Townshend's cunning hand, their levies on glass, paint, paper, lead, and tea slicing into the daily lives of colonists with surgical precision, transforming necessities into symbols of imperial control, each tax a reminder that London's grip tightened with every transaction. Unlike the Stamp Act, which could be evaded by shunning stamped paper, these duties clung to the very materials of existence: windows for light, paint for shelter, paper for communication, tea for comfort, each purchase an unwilling tribute to an empire that seemed to mock the sacrifices of its subjects. In Boston's crowded taverns, in New York's bustling counting houses, in Charleston's humid markets, the Acts sparked a fury deeper than before, their insidious reach turning every household into a battleground, every colonist into a reluctant collaborator with policies they despised, policies that violated the sacred compact of English liberty: no taxation without consent. In the flickering candlelight of Virginia's plantation manners, planters like George Washington felt the sting, their tobacco profits, hard-earned through years of toil, now siphoned to pay for redcoats stationed in distant forts, their autonomy eroded by a parliament that cared nothing for their struggles, their loyalty repaid with demands that felt like chains. The Act's revenue, earmarked to fund governors and judges, struck at the heart of colonial self-governance. For generations, assemblies had wielded the power of the purse, holding executives accountable, ensuring judges respected local sentiment. But now, London's coin freed these officials from provincial oversight, transforming them into Westminster's puppets, answerable only to a distant crown, indifferent to the will of those they governed. In Philadelphia's coffeehouses, merchants like Charles Thompson calculated the cost not just in coin, but in freedom. Their trade networks, built on decades of enterprise, now ensnared by duties that turned honest commerce into an act of submission. In Boston, where resistance burned hottest, Samuel Adams wove a narrative of oppression, his pen sharp as a blade, his committees of correspondence pulsing with reports of customs officers' zeal, their searches invasive, their seizures ruthless, their presence a daily insult to a people who had fought alongside the crown, only to be treated as subjects to be taxed, not partners to be respected. The Act's enforcement was relentless, naval patrols scouring the coast, their cannons glinting under the Atlantic sun, customs officials, once pliable with a bribe, now backed by royal authority, their diligence a scourge on merchants who had thrived in the shadows of lax oversight. In New York, Isaac Sears rallied dockworkers, their anger fueled by duties that choked their livelihoods, their defiance organized under the Sons of Liberty's banner, their protests a blend of calculated theater and raw fury, effigies of tax collectors swinging from liberty trees, a warning to any who dared enforce London's will. The Townshend Act's constitutional implications horrified colonial lawyers, men like John Adams, whose reverence for English law made the Act's audacity unbearable, their levies a violation of rights rooted in centuries of precedent, their enforcement a betrayal of the Magna Carta's promise that no free man could be taxed without representation. In Massachusetts's General Court, resolutions echoed Patrick Henry's earlier defiance, questioning Parliament's authority to impose internal taxes, their arguments spreading through correspondence networks uniting colonies in a shared grievance, a shared resolve. The Act's revenue, funding officials beyond colonial control, threatened to unravel the delicate balance that had allowed self-governance to flourish within the empire, governors ignoring assemblies, judges enforcing unpopular laws, their salaries secured by London's gold, their loyalty no longer to the people they served. In Charleston's markets, where rice and indigo sustained fortunes, planters like Christopher Gadsden saw the Acts as a prelude to greater tyranny, their yellow flag bearing a coiled rattlesnake and the words, "Don't tread on me," a symbol of defiance that would echo through the ages, their resistance a call to arms for a people weary of imperial demands. The Acts transformed daily life into a battlefield. A merchant glazing his shop paid London's price, a housewife brewing tea funded redcoat garrisons, a lawyer drafting briefs contributed to customs officers' wages, each act of commerce a reluctant bow to an empire that demanded submission without consent. In the colonies' quiet corners, resistance took root, non-importation agreements spreading, local artisans gaining favor, as colonists shunned taxed goods, their economic defiance a patriotic act, their resolve a spark that would soon ignite a greater fire. The Townshend Acts, meant to stabilize an empire's finances, instead deepened its fractures, their duties a catalyst for unity among disparate colonies, their enforcement a goad to men like Adams, Henry, and Gadsden, whose vision of liberty refused to bend. In the streets, in the assemblies, in the hearts of colonists, a new narrative took shape, one of defiance, of rights unyielding, of a people ready to challenge an empire that had forgotten their worth. The Acts, like the Stamp Act before them, were a miscalculation, a spark in a tinderbox, their legacy not revenue, but rebellion, their failure a prelude to a storm that would soon break over an empire unprepared for the fury of its own people. In the waning days of 1773, a tempest brewed in Boston's icy harbour. The Tea Act, a deceptively modest measure from London's halls, igniting a firestorm that would sear the bonds of empire, its provisions granting the East India Company a monopoly to sell tea directly to the colonies, undercutting local merchants, slashing prices, yet preserving a tax that burned like a brand in colonial hearts. This was no mere commercial policy, it was a calculated affront, a reminder of Parliament's unyielding claim to tax without consent, a taunt to a people already bristling from the Townshend Act's indignities, their patience worn thin by years of imperial overreach. In Boston's taverns, where the scent of rebellion mingled with the tang of ale, Samuel Adams saw opportunity in the Act's audacity, his mind weaving a tapestry of resistance, his committees of correspondence humming with plans to transform a tax on tea into a rallying cry for liberty, a spark to unite 13 disparate colonies against a common foe. The Tea Act's tax, a mere 3 pence per pound, was less about revenue than control, a symbolic chain linking colonial commerce to Westminster's will, its low price a lure to tempt colonists into compliance, to make them complicit in their own subjugation, each sip of tea a silent acceptance of Parliament's authority. In Philadelphia's bustling markets, merchants like Charles Thompson calculated the threat, their profits imperiled by the East India Company's monopoly, their autonomy mocked by a tax they had no voice in imposing, their anger shared by artisans and shopkeepers who saw their livelihoods slipping into London's grasp. In Charleston's humid wharves, rice planters and traders recoiled at the Act's implications, their trade networks built on years of enterprise now undermined by a company propped up by royal favor, its cheap tea a Trojan horse carrying the weight of imperial domination. In Boston, where defiance ran deepest, the Sons of Liberty, under Adams's deft guidance, orchestrated a spectacle that would echo through history, the Boston Tea Party, December 16, 1773, a night when 60 men, some disguised as Mohawk warriors, boarded 3 East India Company ships, their faces blackened, their resolve unshakable, dumping 342 chests of tea into the harbour's frigid waters, each splash a defiant rebuke to Parliament's arrogance, each shattered crate a declaration that the colonies would not bend. The act was no spontaneous riot, it was theatre, meticulously planned, its message clear: the colonists would rather destroy tea than drink it taxed, their liberty worth more than the empire's cheapest offering, their unity a force no navy could subdue. In New York and Philadelphia, similar acts followed, tea ships turned away, cargoes left to rot, the colonies' refusal a chorus of resistance, a refusal to bow to a policy that mocked their rights. London's response was swift, brutal, the coercive acts of 1774, branded by colonists as the intolerable acts, a punishment designed to crush Boston's spirit, to make an example of the city that dared defy the crown. The port of Boston, the lifeblood of its economy, was closed, its wharves silenced, its merchants ruined, its people left to starve under the weight of imperial wrath, the Massachusetts Charter gutted, its self-governance stripped, royal officials empowered to rule without restraint, their authority backed by redcoats quartered in colonial homes. In Virginia's House of Burgesses, Patrick Henry's voice thundered, calling the acts a declaration of war on colonial liberty, his words rallying support for Boston, his vision of a united resistance taking shape, committees of correspondence knitting colonies together, their shared outrage a bond stronger than any law. In Charleston, Christopher Gadsden's rattlesnake flag flew higher, its "Don't tread on me," a warning to an empire that underestimated its colonies' resolve, the act's harshness galvanizing southern planters to stand with northern merchants, their differences fading in the face of a common threat. The coercive acts meant to isolate Boston instead forged a continental alliance, the First Continental Congress summoned in 1774, delegates from 12 colonies gathering in Philadelphia, their debates charged with the urgency of a people pushed to the brink, their resolutions calling for boycotts, for militias, for defiance. The act's cruelty, closing a port, dissolving a charter, quartering troops, revealed the empire's true face, not a protector, but a tyrant, its laws not justice, but oppression. The Tea Act, a small spark, had ignited a conflagration, its tax a symbol of subjugation, its monopoly a threat to colonial enterprise, its consequences a catalyst for unity. The Boston Tea Party, a single night's defiance, became a beacon, its ripples spreading through colonies now awake to their shared fate, their shared fight. The coercive acts meant to break the colonies, instead bound them, their harshness a forge where resistance was tempered, their injustice a call that echoed from Georgia's pines to New Hampshire's granite hills. The Tea Act and its aftermath were no mere skirmish, they were the prelude to revolution, a moment when colonists, pushed beyond endurance, chose liberty over submission, their defiance a fire that would soon consume an empire's illusions, leaving only the question of how fiercely it would burn. In the crisp dawn of April 1775, the green fields of Lexington and Concord, cradled by Massachusetts's rolling hills, erupted in musket fire, a sudden clash that shattered the uneasy peace between crown and colonies, the first shots of a war that would redraw the map of an empire, their echoes carrying the weight of a people's defiance. The coercive acts had tightened London's grip, closing Boston's port, stripping Massachusetts' charter, quartering redcoats in colonial homes, yet instead of submission, they kindled a fiercer resolve, colonists arming themselves, their militias drilling in secret, their hearts steeled by the memory of taxes imposed without consent, of rights trampled by a distant parliament. British General Thomas Gage, stationed in Boston, sought to crush this growing rebellion, his orders clear: march to Concord, seize the colonial arsenal, arrest the ringleaders, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, men whose names had become synonymous with resistance, their influence a spark that threatened to ignite a continent. In the moonlit hours of April 19th, 700 redcoats marched from Boston, their bayonets gleaming, their boots pounding a rhythm of imperial might, but Paul Revere's midnight ride, a galloping warning through the darkened countryside, roused the Minutemen, farmers, blacksmiths, shopkeepers, transformed into soldiers by the cause of liberty, their muskets ready, their courage unshaken. At Lexington's village green, 70 militia faced the British line, Captain John Parker's voice steady. "Stand your ground, don't fire unless fired upon, but if they mean to have a war, let it begin here." A challenge met by a volley of British musketry. 8 colonists fell, their blood staining the grass, the first martyrs of a revolution that had now moved from words to war. In Concord, the British found empty arsenals, the munitions spirited away, but as they retreated, thousands of militia swarmed, their shots from behind stone walls and ancient oaks turning the march into a gauntlet, redcoats falling, their disciplined ranks unraveling under the weight of colonial defiance. In Philadelphia, the Second Continental Congress convened, its delegates, from Virginia's fiery Patrick Henry to Massachusetts' resolute John Adams, grappling with the reality of open conflict, their debates charged with urgency, their resolve tempered by the bloodshed at Lexington and Concord. They formed a Continental Army, a ragtag force of farmers and artisans, its command entrusted to George Washington, a Virginia planter whose quiet dignity and battlefield experience made him the unanimous choice, his presence a symbol of unity for colonies long divided by custom and commerce. Washington rode north to Cambridge, his mind heavy with the task of forging an army from men untested in war, their muskets mismatched, their supplies scant, their spirit their only strength against the world's mightiest empire. The Battle of Bunker Hill, June 1775, became the crucible of this nascent rebellion, colonists seizing the high ground above Boston, their makeshift fortifications on Breed's Hill, a defiant challenge to Gage's forces, their determination rooted in the belief that liberty was worth any price. The British assaulted, their red lines advancing with disciplined precision, their drums beating, their bayonets fixed, but the colonial militia, under William Prescott's command, held firm, their orders stark. Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes, each volley a testament to their resolve, each fallen redcoat a message that this was no mere uprising, but a war. Twice the British charged, twice they were repelled, their ranks shattered by colonial fire, their officers cut down, their confidence shaken. The third assault succeeded, colonial ammunition spent, but the cost was staggering, over 1,000 British casualties, a toll that stunned London, a victory that proved the colonists could stand against the Empire's best, their courage a beacon for a cause now cemented in blood. In the aftermath, the colonies buzzed with purpose, militias swelling, towns stockpiling arms, the Congress issuing a declaration of the causes and necessity of taking up arms, its words a blend of defiance and plea, asserting loyalty to the crown while demanding redress, a final attempt at peace overshadowed by the reality of war. In Boston's streets, Samuel Adams rallied the people, his committees of correspondence spreading news of Bunker Hill's valor, their letters forging bonds between colonies, their shared sacrifice a glue stronger than any law. In Virginia, Thomas Jefferson's pen began to shape arguments that would soon define a nation, his mind wrestling with the ideals that justified rebellion, liberty, consent, the rights of man. The clashes at Lexington, Concord, and Bunker Hill were no mere skirmishes. They were the birth pangs of a revolution, proof that the colonists, though outmatched in arms, were not in spirit, their defiance a fire that burned brighter with each engagement, their cause a challenge to an empire that had underestimated their resolve, their unity a force that would soon reshape the world, leaving only the question of how far it would carry them. By the autumn of 1777, the American Revolution, kindled in the blood-soaked fields of Lexington and Concord, had grown into a fire that no British strategy could quench, its flames fanned by the audacity of a people who refused to bow, their defiance crystallized in the forests of Saratoga, a campaign that would shift the destiny of nations. General John Burgoyne, a gentleman soldier with a playwright's flair, led a grand British army southward from Canada, his plan a glittering vision of imperial might, to sever New England from the southern colonies, to crush the rebellion by splitting its heart, his columns heavy with artillery, resplendent in scarlet, their confidence bolstered by Hessian mercenaries and native allies, their path through New York's wilderness meant to end in triumph at Albany. Yet the Americans, under General Horatio Gates, a cautious tactician, and Benedict Arnold, a firebrand whose courage outshone his later infamy, stood ready, their militia bolstered by Continental regulars, their resolve hardened by 2 years of war, their knowledge of the land a weapon sharper than any bayonet. In the dense woods near Saratoga, September and October saw clashes that shook the empire's foundations, the battles of Freeman's Farm and Bemis Heights, where American riflemen, hidden among trees, poured deadly fire into British ranks, their volleys shattering the disciplined lines of redcoats, their sharpshooters felling officers with chilling precision, Burgoyne's army bleeding men and morale with each engagement. Arnold's daring charge at Bemis Heights, defying Gates's caution, turned the tide, his men driving the British back, their spirit unbroken even as Arnold fell wounded, his leg shattered, his heroism a spark that ignited victory. By October 17, 1777, Burgoyne, his army battered, his supplies dwindling, his retreat cut off by swarms of militia, surrendered, nearly 6,000 redcoats laying down their arms, their defeat a humiliation that echoed from New York's forests to London's gilded halls, a signal to the world that the American cause was no fleeting rebellion, but a force capable of humbling an empire. In Philadelphia, the Continental Congress, exiled by British occupation, seized on Saratoga's triumph. Their delegates, from John Adams's steely resolve to Benjamin Franklin's cunning diplomacy, recognizing a moment to turn the war's tide, to draw allies into their desperate fight. Across the Atlantic, in Paris's opulent salons, Franklin, America's ambassador, wove a spell of charm and calculation, his wit disarming French skeptics, his arguments painting the colonies as a cause worth backing, Saratoga's victory, the proof they needed that America could win. France, eager to wound its ancient rival, saw opportunity in the American defiance. King Louis XVI's ministers, led by the shrewd Comte de Vergennes, weighing the risks against the chance to humble Britain, their decision shaped by the image of Burgoyne's army, once invincible, now prisoners in a wilderness they could not conquer. On February 6, 1778, the Treaty of Alliance was signed, France pledging troops, ships, money, transforming a colonial uprising into a global war, its navy ready to challenge Britain's mastery of the seas, its armies poised to join the American fight. In the colonies, Saratoga's echoes stirred hearts, militia ranks swelling, farmers and shopkeepers enlisting, their faith in victory renewed, their sacrifices fueled by the knowledge that France's might now stood with them, their cause no longer a solitary struggle, but a beacon for nations weary of British dominance. In Virginia's taverns, Patrick Henry's voice rang with renewed vigor, his speeches weaving Saratoga's triumph into a call for perseverance, his words a reminder that liberty demanded endurance, that allies abroad strengthened but did not replace the colonists' resolve. In Boston, Samuel Adams's committees of correspondence spread the news, their letters knitting colonies tighter, their shared victory a bond that transcended regional divides, a promise that unity could overcome even the empire's vast resources. The alliance with France reshaped the war, British strategies faltering as they faced a new enemy, their navies stretched across oceans, their armies diverted to defend Caribbean colonies, their focus splintered by the global scope of a conflict they had not foreseen. In Charleston's markets, merchants like Christopher Gadsden saw hope in French ships, their sails a challenge to British blockades, their cannons a shield for colonial trade. Yet the alliance brought challenges, French troops untested on American soil, their commanders unfamiliar with the rugged terrain, their presence a test of colonial patience as much as a boon. Saratoga, a triumph born of American grit, had opened a door to the world, its victory, not just a battlefield success but a diplomatic earthquake, its ripples drawing Spain, Holland into the fray, their support further straining Britain's overstretched empire. Saratoga's legacy was a turning point, its battles proof that the colonists, though outnumbered, could outfight, outlast. Their victory a clarion call that rallied allies, emboldened patriots, shook the confidence of an empire that had underestimated its subjects. The war, once a colonial rebellion, was now a global struggle. Its outcome no longer certain, its stakes no longer just liberty, but the very shape of the world, a question that hung in the balance, waiting for the next clash to decide. By 1778, the American Revolution, emboldened by Saratoga's triumph, burned with a fervor that drew the world's gaze, its flames now fanned by French alliance. Yet the British, stung but unbowed, shifted their strategy southward, their eyes fixed on the colony's rich ports, their plan to choke the rebellion by seizing its economic heart. General Henry Clinton, commanding from New York, saw opportunity in the South's sprawling plantations, its loyalist enclaves, its rivers teeming with trade, believing a campaign there could rally Tory support, sever supply lines, crush the rebellion where it seemed most vulnerable. In December 1778, Savannah fell, its defences crumbling under British assault, its capture a signal that the war, far from won, would test the colony's resolve in new and brutal ways. Georgia's coast now a foothold for an empire determined to reclaim its dominion. By 1780, Charleston followed, the largest city south of Philadelphia, its surrender a crushing blow, 8,000 American troops lost, their defeat a wound that shook the Continental Congress, their morale tested as British banners rose over the South's proudest port. Yet in the South's tangled swamps and rolling hills, resistance stirred, not in grand armies, but in the guerrilla warfare of men like Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, whose bands of irregulars struck like spectres, ambushing redcoat patrols, vanishing into Carolina's marshes, their raids a constant thorn in British plans, their defiance proof that the South would not yield easily. In Virginia's taverns, in Georgia's clearings, patriots rallied, their militias bolstered by farmers and frontiersmen, their muskets drawn not just for liberty but for survival, their homes now battlegrounds, their families under threat. The British, expecting loyalist uprisings, found instead a people united, their loyalty to the crown eroded by years of taxes, garrisons, and broken promises, their spirit unbroken even as Clinton's forces tightened their grip, their victories marred by the South's relentless resistance. In January 1781, the tide began to turn at Cowpens, a muddy pasture in South Carolina, where General Daniel Morgan, a rugged veteran of frontier wars, outwitted Banastra Tarleton's feared dragoons, his militia luring the British into a trap, their disciplined volleys shattering Tarleton's ranks, his retreat a humiliation that lifted American spirits, its 500 British casualties a testament to the colony's growing prowess. 2 months later, at Guilford Courthouse, General Nathaniel Greene, a Quaker turned strategist, faced Lord Cornwallis, his army outnumbered, his tactics daring, fighting a battle that bled the British dry, their victory costing 800 men, a price so steep it weakened Cornwallis's campaign, his forces limping northward, their confidence shaken, their resources stretched thin. Greene's strategy, avoiding decisive defeat, wearing down the enemy, turned the South's vastness into a weapon, its forests and rivers a labyrinth that exhausted British resolve, its people a force that refused to break. By October 1781, the war's climax loomed at Yorktown, Virginia, where Cornwallis, seeking a fortified base, entrenched his 7,000 men, his confidence buoyed by British naval supremacy, his position seemingly impregnable. Yet General George Washington, sensing opportunity, marched south from New York, his Continental Army joined by French troops under Comte de Rochambeau, their alliance a fusion of American grit and European discipline, their plan a bold gamble to trap Cornwallis against the sea. The French fleet, led by Admiral de Grasse, outmaneuvered the British Navy, sealing Chesapeake Bay, cutting off Cornwallis's escape, their cannons pounding his fortifications as Washington's army, bolstered by French artillery, tightened the noose, their trenches creeping closer, their bombardment relentless. On October 19, 1781, Cornwallis surrendered, his 7,000 men marching out, their muskets stacked, their drums silent, their defeat a thunderclap that shook the empire, its echo reaching London's halls where Parliament reeled, its will to fight crumbling under the weight of a war grown unwinnable. In Philadelphia, the Continental Congress, battered but resolute, hailed Yorktown as a beacon of hope. Their delegates, from John Adams to Thomas Jefferson, crafting plans for a nation now within reach, their debates charged with the urgency of victory, their vision of liberty sharpened by years of sacrifice. In Boston's streets, Samuel Adams's committees spread the news, their letters carrying tales of Yorktown's triumph, their words forging a continental resolve to see the fight through. In Charleston's liberated markets, Christopher Gadsden's rattlesnake flag flew higher, its defiance a symbol of a people who had endured invasion, occupation, loss, yet emerged unbroken, their cause now a global challenge to imperial might. Yorktown was no mere battle, it was a turning point, its victory proof that the colonies, with French aid, could defeat the world's greatest army, its surrender a signal that the empire's grip was slipping, its cost a burden Britain could no longer bear. The South, once a British stronghold, became their graveyard, its swamps, its hills, its people defying every expectation, their resistance a fire that burned through redcoat ranks, their alliance with France a tide that swept away imperial dreams. Yorktown's legacy was a question not of if independence would come, but when, its answer lying in the resolve of a people who had fought too long, bled too much, to turn back now. In the autumn of 1781, the smoke of Yorktown's siege still hung heavy over Virginia's tidewater, the surrender of Lord Cornwallis's army, 7,000 redcoats marching out under the weight of defeat, their muskets stacked, their colours cased, a spectacle that reverberated from the Chesapeake's muddy banks to the gilded halls of Westminster, its impact a thunderclap that shattered Britain's resolve to hold its American colonies. The victory, won by the iron will of George Washington's Continentals and the disciplined might of French troops under Comte de Rochambeau, backed by Admiral de Grasse's fleet sealing the sea, was no mere battle. It was the culmination of 6 years of defiance, a moment when the colonies, battered, outnumbered, outgunned, proved their cause could humble the world's greatest empire. Their triumph, a beacon that illuminated the path to independence, a path now clear, though not yet fully walked. In the wake of Yorktown, the British war machine, once a juggernaut, faltered, its gears grinding under the strain of a global conflict, its coffers drained, its morale broken, its people weary of a war that seemed unwinnable, a rebellion that refused to die. In London's coffee houses, where news of Yorktown spread like wildfire, merchants and MPs whispered of the cost, the thousands of soldiers lost, the millions of pounds spent, the navy stretched thin by French and Spanish fleets, the empire's prestige tarnished by a defeat that no amount of rhetoric could soften. Lord North, the Prime Minister, his face ashen, declared the war all but lost, his government teetering as Parliament's hawks, once eager for conquest, now faced a nation tired of sacrifice, their voices drowned by calls for peace, their strategies exposed as folly in the face of American resolve. The British public, reading of Cornwallis's surrender, saw not just a military setback, but a national humiliation. Their empire, invincible for a century, now humbled by farmers and shopkeepers, their dreams of dominion across the Atlantic fading like mist under a rising sun. In the colonies, Yorktown's triumph electrified the weary. From Boston's crowded taverns to Charleston's liberated wharves, the news carried by galloping couriers, by Samuel Adams's tireless committees of correspondence, each report a spark that reignited hope, each tale of redcoats marching to surrender, a reminder that liberty, though costly, was within reach. In Philadelphia, the Continental Congress, battered by years of retreat, of funding a war with promises and paper, hailed the victory. Their delegates, John Adams's pragmatism blending with Thomas Jefferson's idealism, drafting plans for a nation no longer a dream but a necessity, their debates now tinged with the urgency of shaping a future free from imperial chains. In Virginia's fields, farmers who had fought as militia, their homes scarred by war, stood taller, their muskets still warm, their faith in the cause renewed, their sacrifices validated by the sight of Britain's proudest army broken. Yet the victory was not without shadows. The French, whose ships and soldiers had tipped the scales, began to withdraw, their commitment wavering as their own treasury strained, their priorities shifting to Caribbean conquests, their alliance vital but fragile, a reminder that America's fight, though bolstered, remained its own. Washington, his face etched with the weight of command, knew the war was not over. Scattered British garrisons still held New York, Savannah, Charleston, their presence a lingering threat, their loyalist allies still capable of sabotage, their navy still prowling the coasts. In the south, where Francis Marion's guerrillas haunted the swamps, resistance continued, skirmishes flaring as loyalists and patriots clashed, the region's wounds too deep to heal with one victory, its people too divided to rest. In New York's loyalist enclaves, where Tories had pinned their hopes on British might, Yorktown's fall cast a pall, their dreams of restored royal rule crumbling, their futures uncertain, many facing exile, their lands confiscated, their loyalty to the crown now a burden rather than a badge. In the Continental Army's camps, soldiers, unpaid, ragged, celebrated Yorktown but hungered for peace, their endurance a testament to a cause that had outlasted every expectation, their unity a force that had turned a rebellion into a revolution. Washington, ever cautious, urged vigilance, his letters to Congress warning that Britain, though wounded, was not yet defeated, its pride too deep, its resources too vast, to abandon the fight without terms. Yorktown's legacy was a pivot, its surrender, not the war's end, but its turning point, a moment when the colonies, once dismissed as rabble, stood as equals to an empire, their victory a clarion call to the world, their cause a challenge to monarchies everywhere. In Boston, Samuel Adams saw in Yorktown the dawn of a new era, his vision of liberty now shared by a continent, his networks of resistance now channels for nation-building. In Virginia, Jefferson's pen began sketching a future republic, its principles rooted in the rights for which they fought, its promise a government by consent, not coercion. Yorktown, a triumph of will, of alliance, of sacrifice, was a question answered. Could the colonies win? And a new one posed. Could they govern? Its answer lying in the trials still to come, in the peace yet to be won. In the autumn of 1783, the quill of diplomacy scratched out a new chapter for the American colonies, the Treaty of Paris, signed on September 3rd, a document that sealed the Revolution's triumph, its ink proclaiming the United States a sovereign nation, free from the Crown's grasp, its words a testament to 6 years of blood, defiance, sacrifice. In the opulent salons of Paris, where chandeliers cast their glow on gilded walls, American negotiators, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, John Jay, faced their British counterparts, their minds sharp, their resolve unshaken, their task to secure not just peace, but a future, a nation unbound by imperial chains, its borders stretching from the Atlantic's restless waves to the Mississippi's mighty flow. Yorktown's surrender, 2 years prior, had broken Britain's will, its army humbled, its treasury drained, its people weary of a war that had cost them an empire, yet the treaty's terms were no mere capitulation. They were a recognition of a new power, forged in rebellion, tempered by victory, destined to reshape the world. Franklin, his wit a weapon as potent as any musket, navigated the negotiations with a statesman's guile, his spectacles glinting as he pressed for terms that would secure America's place among nations, his charm disarming British reluctance, his arguments rooted in the reality of Yorktown's defeat. Adams, stern, unyielding, insisted on boundaries that honored the colony's sacrifices, his Puritan rigor a counterpoint to Franklin's diplomacy, his demands ensuring the new nation's expanse, from the Great Lakes' icy shores to Florida's sunlit frontier. Jay, his legal mind honed by years of colonial governance, guarded against European intrigues, his vigilance ensuring Britain could not exploit French or Spanish ambitions to limit America's gains, his signature on the treaty a pledge that the United States would stand as an equal, not a pawn, in the world's affairs. The treaty's provisions were a revolution's reward. Britain acknowledged the 13 colonies as free, sovereign, independent states, its king relinquishing all claims to their governance, its empire ceding lands west to the Mississippi, a vast domain that doubled the new nation's size, opening a wilderness of promise to settlers who had fought for liberty. The right to fish off Newfoundland's Grand Banks, a lifeline for New England's economy, was secured, Franklin's insistence ensuring coastal communities could thrive, their nets cast without fear of British interference. American debts to British creditors, a thorny issue, were addressed, the negotiators balancing pragmatism with pride, their agreement a nod to future trade, a bridge to peace with a former foe. In return, the treaty urged Congress to restore confiscated Loyalist property, a gesture toward reconciliation, though one met with skepticism by patriots whose homes had been burned, whose families had been torn by war. In Philadelphia's State House, where the Continental Congress now gathered, the treaty's arrival sparked jubilation, its terms a vindication of years spent in camps, on battlefields, in exile, delegates like Thomas Jefferson reading its clauses with a quiet awe, their vision of a republic now tangible, their debates turning from war to nationhood, from resistance to governance. In Boston's taverns, Samuel Adams's committees of correspondence spread the news, their letters carrying the treaty's promise to every colony, their words knitting a fractured people into a nation, their shared victory a bond stronger than any law. In Charleston's markets, where Christopher Gadsden's rattlesnake flag still flew, merchants and planters hailed the treaty, their trade routes now free from British blockades, their future no longer dictated by a distant crown. Yet the treaty's ink carried shadows. The Mississippi's western border, a triumph on paper, was contested by Spain, its claims to the river a challenge for a nation too young to enforce its rights. Native tribes, whose lands lay within the new boundaries, were ignored, their sovereignty unacknowledged, their future a question the treaty left unanswered. Loyalists, tens of thousands who had clung to the crown, faced exile, their fates uncertain, their losses a bitter counterpoint to patriot celebrations, their plight a reminder that victory came with division. In Virginia's fields, farmers who had fought as militia read the treaty's terms, their relief tempered by the knowledge that peace was fragile, that a nation born in war must now learn to govern itself, to balance liberty with order, to fulfill the promise of its founding. The Treaty of Paris was no mere document, it was a declaration, its clauses carving a nation from the wreckage of empire, its boundaries a canvas for dreams of expansion, its recognition of independence a challenge to monarchies everywhere. In New York, where British troops prepared to evacuate, the treaty's arrival marked the end of occupation, the stars and stripes rising where the Union Jack had flown. In Paris, Franklin's diplomacy had turned battlefields into bargaining tables, his vision ensuring America's place in a world watching its rise. The treaty, a revolution's capstone, was a beginning, not an end, its promises a foundation for a nation yet to be built, its legacy a question of whether a people, forged in defiance, could govern with the same courage they had fought, their answer lying in the trials of a new era. In the winter of 1783, as the ink dried on the Treaty of Paris, a solemn ceremony unfolded in Annapolis, Maryland, where George Washington, the stoic Virginian who had led a ragged army to triumph, stood before the Continental Congress, his sword sheathed, his commission surrendered, his act of resignation a quiet thunderclap that echoed beyond the chamber's walls, its meaning a cornerstone for a nation founded on the will of its people, not the might of its generals. The war, won through 6 years of sacrifice, of blood, spilled on fields from Bunker Hill to Yorktown, had ended, the British Empire's grip broken, its troops preparing to sail from New York's harbor, their departure a final bow to a rebellion that had defied the world's greatest power. Yet Washington's gesture, returning his authority to civilian hands, was no mere formality. It was a deliberate rejection of tyranny, a pledge that the new United States would be governed by law, not ambition, its future shaped by consent, not conquest, its principles a beacon to a world accustomed to kings and conquerors. In the flickering candlelight of Annapolis's State House, delegates watched in awe, men like Thomas Jefferson, whose pen had begun to craft the ideals of a republic, and James Madison, whose mind already turned to the machinery of governance, saw in Washington's act a model for leadership, a refusal to seize power that could have made him king, a choice that set America apart from empires built on force. The war had tested the colony's resolve, its battles forging a people from disparate provinces, its victories from Saratoga's forests to Yorktown's siege, proving their capacity to stand as one, yet Washington's resignation proved their commitment to something greater, a government answerable to its citizens, its authority rooted in trust, not fear. In Boston's taverns, where Samuel Adams's committees once plotted defiance, the news of Washington's act spread, its significance clear. The Revolution's hero had chosen service over supremacy, his example a shield against the spectre of military rule. In New York, where British troops boarded ships, their red coats fading into the harbor's mist, the city's liberation marked the war's end, its streets alive with patriots reclaiming homes, shops, lives disrupted by years of occupation, their joy tempered by the sight of loyalists, thousands who had clung to the crown, now boarding those same ships, their futures uncertain, their loyalty a burden that exiled them to Canada, the Caribbean, England's distant shores. These Tories, once neighbours, now outcasts, carried with them the war's bitter cost, their confiscated lands a resource for the new nation, their departure a reminder that victory divided as much as it united, their fates a shadow on the Revolution's triumph. In Charleston's markets, where Christopher Gadsden's rattlesnake flag still flew, merchants hailed the British withdrawal, their trade freed from imperial blockades, yet they too grappled with the loyalist question, their communities torn by allegiances that lingered like scars. Washington's resignation was a clarion call, its echoes reaching every colony, from Georgia's pine forests to New Hampshire's granite hills, a signal that the Revolution's purpose was not just independence, but a new kind of governance, one where power flowed from the people, not from a single man's sword. In Philadelphia's coffee houses, where debates once centered on resistance, talk now turned to nation-building, to crafting a system that could balance liberty with order, unity with diversity. The challenges of peace as daunting as those of war. The Articles of Confederation, the nation's first framework, already showed cracks, its weak central authority unable to tax, to regulate trade, to quell disputes between states, its flaws a warning that independence, though won, was not yet secured. In Virginia's fields, where farmers had fought as militia, the news of Washington's act stirred pride, their sacrifices validated by a leader who valued their freedom above his own glory, their dreams of self-rule now resting on the fragile hope of a government yet to be perfected. In the quiet of Mount Vernon, Washington himself reflected on the war's toll, his letters to Congress urging stability, his private thoughts wrestling with the nation's future, its promise vast but untested, its unity fragile in the face of regional jealousies, economic strife, lingering divisions. The Loyalist exodus, though necessary, left wounds, their lands redistributed to patriots, their absence a reminder of the Revolution's human cost, its victory a balance of gain and loss. Washington's resignation was no mere gesture, it was a foundation, its significance a cornerstone for a republic that would shun dictatorship, its legacy a challenge to the world's monarchies, a proof that power could be wielded, then relinquished, for the greater good. In the colonies, now states, his act inspired a generation, from Jefferson's idealism to Adams's pragmatism, their efforts turning to the work of governance, of forging a nation from the ashes of war. The British withdrawal from New York, the Loyalists' flight, Washington's surrender of power, were threads in a tapestry of independence. Their pattern a question: could a people, united in defiance, govern with the same resolve? Their answer lying in the trials of a nation still being born. In the fragile dawn of 1783, as the Treaty of Paris secured America's independence, the United States stood on the precipice of nationhood, its victory over Britain a triumph of will, yet its future shadowed by the Articles of Confederation, a framework forged in haste, its weaknesses a looming threat to the liberty so dearly won. The Articles, ratified in 1781, bound 13 states in a loose alliance, a firm league of friendship, their central government, a frail Congress, granted no power to tax, to regulate trade, to enforce laws, its authority a whisper where a command was needed, its structure a reflection of colonial fears of tyranny. yet a recipe for chaos in a nation struggling to stand. From Massachusetts' rocky shores to Georgia's sultry lowlands, the young republic grappled with the war's aftermath, its economy shattered, its debts towering, its unity fraying under the weight of regional rivalries, economic strife, the specter of disorder that tested the revolution's promise. In Philadelphia's State House, where delegates once declared independence, the Continental Congress languished, its coffers empty, its soldiers unpaid, its authority mocked by states jealous of their sovereignty, each guarding its purse, its militia, its pride, as if the war's lessons of unity had faded with the gunsmoke. The nation's debt, millions owed to soldiers, merchants, foreign allies, loomed like a storm cloud, interest payments mounting, paper currency worthless, farmers and shopkeepers crushed by taxes levied by states to cover their own war debts, their resentment simmering in taverns in town squares where whispers of rebellion stirred. In New York's bustling ports, merchants faced foreign competition, British goods flooding markets under punitive tariffs, American ships barred from West Indian trade, their profits choked by a Congress powerless to negotiate treaties, its weakness a chain on the nation's ambitions. In Virginia's tobacco fields, planters like James Madison saw the Article's flaws with growing alarm, their state's prosperity tied to trade that Congress could not protect, their borders vulnerable to disputes with neighbors, their future uncertain in a nation unable to speak with one voice. The Article's design, meant to preserve liberty, instead bred paralysis, no executive to enforce laws, no judiciary to settle conflicts, no means to fund an army to guard against threats, internal or external, native tribes, Spanish ambitions, British garrisons still lingering in western forts, all testing a nation too weak to respond. In Boston's crowded streets, Samuel Adams, once the architect of resistance, now watched as economic hardship fueled unrest, his committees of correspondence, once a tool of defiance, now struggling to hold a fracturing republic together, their letters pleading for cooperation where none was found. The crisis deepened in 1786 when Shays' Rebellion erupted in western Massachusetts, a spark that illuminated the Article's failure. Its leader, Daniel Shays, a Revolutionary War veteran, driven by desperation, his farm threatened by foreclosure, his neighbors crushed by taxes, their grievances ignored by a state government deaf to their pleas. Hundreds of farmers, armed with muskets and pitchforks, stormed courthouses, their aim to halt debt auctions, their anger a cry against a system that taxed the poor to pay the rich, their rebellion a warning that liberty, without order, could descend into anarchy. In Philadelphia, news of Shays' march sent tremors through the elite, men like Alexander Hamilton, whose vision of a strong nation clashed with the Article's frailty, his pen calling for reform, his voice urging a convention to forge a new framework, one equal to the challenges of a nation born in war. In Charleston's markets, where merchants like Christopher Gadsden once rallied defiance, the rebellion's echoes stirred fear, their trade disrupted by economic chaos, their faith in the Republic shaken by a government unable to protect property, to ensure stability, to unify a people divided by region, class, interest. Shays' rebellion, though crushed by militia, was no mere uprising. It was a symptom of a deeper malaise. In the sweltering summer of 1787, Philadelphia's State House, where independence was declared 11 years prior, became the crucible for a nation's rebirth, the Constitutional Convention, a gathering of 55 delegates, their minds sharp, their tempers frayed, their task to forge a new framework from the ashes of the Articles of Confederation, a government strong enough to unify, yet restrained enough to preserve the liberty won through blood and sacrifice. The Article's weaknesses, exposed by Shays' rebellion, by economic chaos, by a Congress powerless to tax or govern, had driven these men, James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, George Washington, to confront the specter of a republic unraveling, their debates charged with the urgency of a nation teetering on collapse, their vision a delicate balance between order and freedom, unity and diversity, the weight of their decisions destined to shape a continent's future. Madison, the diminutive Virginian with a towering intellect, emerged as the convention's architect, his Virginia Plan, a bold blueprint for a strong national government, its bicameral legislature, executive, judiciary, a radical departure from the Article's feeble Congress, its design rooted in his study of failed confederacies, his notes a map through the chaos of competing interests. In the State House's stifling chamber, Washington presided, his silent presence a steadying force, his reputation a shield against accusations of tyranny, his leadership a reminder of the Republic's debt to his restraint. Franklin, aged and frail, offered wit and wisdom, his voice a bridge between factions, his compromises softening the edges of heated debates, his humor a salve for tempers worn thin by weeks of argument. Hamilton, fiery and ambitious, pushed for a centralized power, his vision of a vigorous nation clashing with fears of monarchy reborn, his eloquence a spark that illuminated the convention's purpose, though often drowned by cries for state sovereignty. The debates raged over representation, the large states, Virginia, Pennsylvania, demanding seats based on population, their influence a reflection of their wealth and numbers, while small states, Delaware, New Jersey, clung to equal representation, their voices fierce in defense of their autonomy, their fears of being swallowed by larger neighbors a constant drumbeat. The Connecticut Compromise, a stroke of genius from Roger Sherman, broke the deadlock, proposing a bicameral legislature, a House apportioned by population, a Senate granting each state 2 votes, its balance a triumph of pragmatism, a foundation for a government that could unite without crushing, govern without dominating. Yet the specter of slavery loomed, southern states, Georgia, South Carolina, demanding their enslaved populations be counted for representation, northern states recoiling, their moral qualms clashing with political necessity, the 3/5 compromise a bitter bargain, each enslaved person counted as 3/5 of a free man for representation and taxation, a deal that preserved the convention but stained its legacy, its silence on slavery's morality a wound left to fester. In the colonies, now states, the convention's work sparked hope and fear, tavern debates in Boston echoing with Samuel Adams's skepticism, his revolutionary zeal wary of centralized power, his voice a reminder of the liberties fought for, now at risk of being traded for stability. In Charleston's markets, merchants like Christopher Gadsden weighed the promise of a stronger nation against the loss of state control, their trade battered by foreign tariffs, their future tied to a government that could protect commerce, enforce treaties, command respect. The Constitution, completed in September 1787, was no mere document. It was a revolution in governance, its checks and balances a safeguard against tyranny, its enumerated powers a framework for unity, its preamble a declaration of a people's will. We the people, a phrase that echoed the revolution's spirit, its promise a nation governed by consent. The ratification battle began, Federalists led by Madison, Hamilton, Jay, arguing in essays that would become the Federalist Papers, their words a defense of a strong union, their logic a bulwark against fears of oppression. Anti-Federalists, wary of distant power, demanded protections for individual rights, their voices loud in Virginia's hills, in New York's ports, their concerns answered by the promise of a Bill of Rights, its 10 amendments, ratified in 1791, shielding freedoms of speech, press, religion, assembly, a shield against the government's overreach, a nod to the revolution's core. In Philadelphia's streets, where the Constitution was born, citizens read its clauses with cautious hope, their faith in the Republic tempered by years of war, of sacrifice, of betrayal by a distant crown. The Constitution's ratification by 1789 was a triumph of compromise, its adoption a testament to a people willing to risk change, to trust in a system untested, to build a nation from the lessons of their rebellion. Washington, elected the first president, took office, his leadership a bridge from war to peace, his example a guide for a government still finding its way. The Constitution was no perfect charter, its compromises on slavery a moral failing, its balance of power a gamble, yet it was a foundation, its strength in its adaptability, its promise in its call to a higher purpose, its legacy a question. Could a nation, born in defiance, govern itself with the same courage, its answer lying in the years of trial and triumph yet to come? In the spring of 1789, as the newly ratified Constitution took root, the United States stood poised at the threshold of nationhood, its capital a bustling New York, where George Washington, the stoic Virginian who had forged victory from defiance, took the oath as the Republic's first president, his hand on a Bible, his voice steady, his presence a beacon for a people weary of war, eager for stability yet wary of power's seductive pull. The Constitution, a fragile compact born of compromise, now faced the test of governance, its checks and balances unproven, its promise of liberty tempered by the challenges of a nation scarred by debt, divided by region, haunted by the unresolved sins of slavery, the dispossession of native tribes. From Boston's windswept harbors to Georgia's sultry plantations, Americans looked to Washington, their trust in his restraint a foundation for a government meant to serve, not rule, their hopes pinned on a republic that could fulfill the revolution's soaring ideals. Washington's presidency, inaugurated on a balcony overlooking Wall Street, set precedents that would define the nation. His cabinet, men like Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, balancing ambition with caution, their rivalries a microcosm of the republic's tensions, commerce versus agriculture, federal power versus state autonomy, unity versus diversity. Hamilton's financial vision, a national bank, assumption of state debts, sparked fierce debates, his plans knitting the states into an economic whole, yet stirring fears of centralized tyranny among anti-federalists like Jefferson, whose agrarian ideals championed individual liberty, local control, his pen already shaping arguments for a nation of yeoman farmers. In Philadelphia's taverns, where the Constitution was debated, citizens weighed these visions, their voices a chorus of hope and skepticism, their faith in the Republic tempered by memories of British overreach, their resolve to guard the freedoms won through blood. The Bill of Rights, ratified in 1791, became the Constitution's shield, its 10 amendments, crafted by Madison's meticulous hand, enshrining freedoms of speech, press, religion, assembly, protections against arbitrary searches, unjust trials, their words a response to anti-federalist fears, a guarantee that the new government would not tread the path of the old empire. In Boston, Samuel Adams, once a firebrand of rebellion, nodded approval, his revolutionary zeal satisfied by safeguards that echoed the Magna Carta, his committees of correspondence now channels for civic pride, their letters spreading news of a nation finding its footing. In Charleston's markets, merchants like Christopher Gadsden, whose rattlesnake flag had defied the crown, saw in the Bill of Rights a promise that their liberties, hard won, would endure, their trade now protected by a government with the power to negotiate treaties, to command respect on the world stage. The election of 1800, a quiet revolution, marked the Republic's first peaceful transfer of power, Jefferson's Democratic Republicans defeating John Adams's Federalists, their victory a testament to a system that allowed dissent without bloodshed, debate without tyranny, its outcome a signal that the Constitution could bend without breaking, its principles enduring even as factions clashed. The Louisiana Purchase, in 1803, doubled the nation's size, Jefferson's bold stroke, securing a vast Western empire from France, its rivers and plains a canvas for expansion, its promise a challenge to balance growth with justice, to reconcile liberty with the displacement of native tribes whose lands were claimed without consent. In Virginia's fields, farmers hailed the purchase, their dreams of westward settlement now tangible, yet their joy shadowed by the question of slavery's spread, its moral weight a fault line beneath the Republic's foundation. In the North, a second Great Awakening stirred souls, preachers like Lyman Beecher, igniting revivals that spread from New England's meeting houses to frontier camp meetings, their calls for reform, fueling movements for abolition, temperance, women's rights, their fervor, a reminder that the Revolution's ideals of equality, liberty, were not yet fully realized. In Seneca Falls, women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton began to voice demands for suffrage, their words a challenge to a nation that preached freedom yet denied it to half its citizens, their courage a spark that would burn through decades. The Republic's growth, its stability, came at a cost, native tribes pushed from ancestral lands, their treaties broken, their voices ignored, slavery's grip tightening in the South, its defenders wielding the Constitution's compromises to protect their peculiar institution, its opponents, like John Quincy Adams, planting seeds of resistance that would grow into a greater struggle. Washington's presidency, the Bill of Rights, the election of 1800, the Louisiana Purchase, were milestones in a nation's ascent, their legacy a republic that could govern itself, adapt to crises, expand its horizons, yet their triumphs were shadowed by unresolved tensions, slavery's stain, native dispossession, the question of who could claim the revolution's promise. By 1825, the United States stood stronger, its government tested, its borders vast, its people bound by a constitution that balanced power with liberty, yet its challenges, equality, justice, unity, remained, their resolution a task for generations yet to come. The Republic, born in defiance, now faced the work of perfecting itself, its ideals a beacon, its flaws a reminder, its future a question: could it live up to the liberty it proclaimed, its answer lying in the trials of a nation still unfolding, still striving, still free.